Hello, everyone. Tim Sylvie here, and I'm joined today by Tom McCluskey once again. How are you, Tom?
Good. I'm a bit hay-fevery, Tim. I'm struggling a little bit, mate, but we manage. We'll get through.
Power through. Now, this is a part two. Since our last show with Blake Hinsey, we ran out of time. We had a load of listener questions, which we didn't get around to talking about because we went into such a nerdy deep dive and everything performance and trackside engineering related. We spoke with Blake about working with Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, and more. So if you haven't listened to the last episode, go back and check that one out. But because we didn't have time, we thought we'd jump back on with Blake and ask some of the questions that were left on our Instagram. We asked for some listener questions and we got some. So we're going to touch on them in a moment. But before we do, Blake, first of all, welcome back. Are you looking forward to the racing this weekend? And can anyone stop Mr. Max Verstappen?
Two-part answer to that question, Tim. Good morning. Hello. I'm fully caffeinated. No hay fever. Thank you very much. I'm fortunate. Anybody suffering, I send my regrets. But am I looking forward to the Monaco Grand Prix? Strangely, yes. I know, you know, we all know that it's going to be a bit of a procession, but I think there's some interesting narratives this weekend. And the one that I'm thinking of is I just looked at Albert Fabrega, all the photos. Everybody's brought a big new rear wing and more drag and more downforce. And I did not think that Aston Martin could put any more drag or downforce on that car. So, as my point of excitement this weekend, I want to know, A, is Mercedes' new car, are they going to be able to unlock some potential that's noticeable here around Monaco, A, and B, it's free practice one hasn't happened yet. And I'm not going to say that I'm super surprised if the Aston is extremely competitive. So I'm looking forward to that this weekend. I hope that Sunday pisses it down. I hope it's super wet. I hope they roll out the new wet tires. I hope they try the inters, maybe a short stint on the softs, back to the inters, and then finish under full wets. We can dream, right? We can dream, right?
That's the dream, mate. I was going to actually briefly, Blake, how much can Mercedes learn at a track like Monaco with such a significant update? Because it's not just the side pods, it's the floor, it's the front suspension as well. Like, how much can they actually get from Monaco?
It's a tough one because like Monaco is one of those things where you set the car up in such a different window. It's super bumpy. You look at like turn 5. You see them going down towards the braking zone and they have to like drive around this bump. I mean, the car's set up like a 4x4 in terms of Formula One standards. So how much will they learn? Enough. Would I rather have learned and introduced that package in Imola or Barcelona? Absolutely. But Monaco's about just keeping it out of the walls. And unless it's terrible, unless it has some huge problems that they haven't seen in the simulator with the suspension or something else, I expect it should be okay. I mean, they're gonna be learning, but yeah, it's not really one of those tracks that you want to be introducing big upgrades on. But they kind of had to, considering a lot of the body work was literally cutting fairings off of the survival cell to put new fairings on to attach the new body work and new bits and pieces. You can't A/B compare that across cars in free practice one. That's literally, you need a day or two to prep the chassis to have all the new bolt-ons on. So good luck to them. And I hope that they make some inroads in finding some performance so that they can at least by the end of the season be caught up and we can have some three-way head-to-head, wheel-to-wheel action next season.
That's good to me, Tim.
Right. Should we get into these questions? So I'm going to just go from the top down. So we'll start with Oscar Calvert Jr. or JR. He says, Blake, I've always been curious to know if the car each year that is produced is just a continuation of the previous year with upgrades, or if it's made from scratch. If it does get made from scratch, does the process of a new season car start right as the previous season is over, or is it simultaneously happening while the season is undergoing? Great question.
Very good question.
Oscar, my friend. Over to you, Blake.
It entirely depends, right? So every now and then you've got a regulation shakeup. We had the introduction of the hybrid V6s back in 2014. And then 2022, we had the new underfloors, the 18-inch wheels and all that stuff. So those are your regulation changes. And those are a little bit more clean slate, but you're never throwing away anything that you've learned. A lot of the stuff, the suspension geometry, the philosophies, those you evolve. And as the aero package has different requirements. You change those characteristics to suit. But it's really tricky. If you go back to like, you know, if I was to design a car from scratch tomorrow, like let's say I went back and did Formula Student or Formula, let's say in university, and I was going to design a car from scratch, I would need to build a car that had such a big window in terms of setup, because I don't know how the tires are going to react. I don't know if we have aero in the car. How does that work? I need such a big window to set up this car, because I don't know what weight distribution do I need to run? What mechanical balance do I need to run? How much aero balance am I going to have? Am I going to have issues with compliance? So that's like starting from scratch, but teams don't want to do that. They take as much as they can learn. You might have huge pieces of carryover as long as the regulations haven't changed, or you haven't been forced to make some changes to deal with a new concept. For example, listening to the Red Bull podcast when they were interviewing Adrian, you know, he's talking about, you know, this RB19 is an evolution of last year's car, and I mean, it was a strong car, so you would like to take as much as you can from that and fine tune it and get a little bit more of it. But so in terms of developing, like, say, the next year's car, that entirely depends on the team. Like, let's say that you've got 2026 regulations. I don't think anybody's probably working on too much in detail. Maybe there's one or two people looking at concepts for 2026 regulations when we have the new engines, right? But I think a lot of the other regulations are still being hammered out. In terms of, let's say, next year, 2024, are Red Bull starting to look at concepts for next year? Probably, but it's not like you have 75% of the workforce looking at that. You might have a couple of people doing, what do we want to change about the RB19? Okay, go away and let's scheme that. So you have, like, you know, short-term R&D, and then like your long-term R&D stuff. And then once we get towards the end of the season, and maybe they say, you know what, boys and girls, we've got this championship wrapped up, both of them, it's no problem, easy to the end. Maybe they'll start shifting efforts over earlier. And that's good, because once you're ahead in the cost cap era,
locked in. Advantage locked in for years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Blake, what about specifically 16 to 17? Because the cars changed aesthetically quite a lot between 2016 and 2017. What was your experience of how much carryover was between those two seasons?
Oh, what was 16, 17, the big wheels?
17 was the big fins on the back and the kind of lower rear wings.
I mean, I think a lot of that, like, yeah, you have philosophical changes in the aerodynamics package, but in terms of suspension geometries changing massively, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure when the wider tires were introduced. That escapes me. That wasn't 17, because I was still at the track in 17. Honestly, having been there,
when you were Red Bull still, right?
Yeah, I was on Verstappen's car across 16 to 17. I don't remember anything massively changing like that. We were like, oh, we've got to completely rethink how we do this. So those, despite those visually large changes from an operational point of view and a vehicle dynamics point of view, maybe there wasn't so much that changed, because nothing sticks out in my memory. I could be completely repressing some trauma or something, but yeah.
Quite possibly. I mean, you did work with Max Verstappen.
That was the RB13, though, wasn't it? 2017.
Ooh,
unlucky for some, unlucky for us. I'm going to look it up really quickly because I need to know. No, sorry, that was it was the RB. Yeah, I think that was the RB13. Anyway, I digress.
Well, I think Oscar got his answer.
Yeah,
in there.
Yeah, I think it just depends.
Now, Tom, you want to have a go at Nan? Usernames on Instagram are just weird.
Shout out Nan_Dalf. Your question is, I want to be a mechanical design engineer, but what are the conditions to enter a team if I don't have any experience of racing at all? That's
a great question. And I can answer that question, and I can also, in the same breath, kind of answer the broader question. Formula One, most Formula One teams are hiring lots of young graduate designers. You don't like the expectation that you should have racing experience if you want to be a designer. You don't need to have racing experience to be a designer. Like, you need to have good CAD skills, good mechanical understanding. Most of you applying for that will be of a mechanical engineering background, or you will maybe be of an aerospace engineering background. So if you want to do physical design of like components, like structural things, you'll most likely be a aerospace structures or mechanical engineer. And if you want to do aerodynamics, you'll most likely have a a better understanding of external flows and aerodynamics. So I think those are the two really ways to do it. Like if you don't, let's say that you're a young aspiring engineer and you want to be a Formula One designer, the expectation that you have experience around race cars does not exist. I know very few mechanical engineers that work in Formula One that have racing experience. Now, if you said, like, I'd like to be a performance engineer, I want to do what you used to do, I would very much likely say that if you have a way to find experience at a track working inside of a race team, I mean, I always say don't work for free. You know, unpaid internships can get in the bin, but at the same time, it's like you don't need to do a full-time job. Do you have some spare weekends that you want to invest and go, right, let me can I talk to your engineers? Let me help clean up. Can I talk to the engineers, mechanics setting up or to setting down this car? Can we talk about, can I volunteer anytime at a weekend to go to a race to help look after XYZ electronics? I knew a lot of young people as I was coming up through my university that would they were moonlighting as LMP2 engineers on the weekends, and they were small teams. Yeah. They don't have a whole lot of budget, they don't have a whole lot of resource, but they'd pay your flights out there and they'd pay you some cash to come out and do electronics for the weekend. And one of those guys is now performance engineer for Kevin. So
yeah, I mean, it's great advice, and it's advice that's echoed up and down the paddock, right at the top level. I mean, we've had people like Trevor Carlin on here, who said the same thing. They went in and they forced their way in. I think there's an element of if you don't necessarily have the skills, you've got to start at the bottom. You've got to force your way in.
Absolutely.
Like you say, I'll come and do this. Let me come and work in your wind tunnel. I'll do it for peanuts. Let me just have a go. Let me come and shadow and see. Like Richard Cregan, who ran the Toyota F1 team back in the day, he started as nothing, literally cleaning the floors in the pit bays. Worked his way up, CEO, team principal, ran the team for years. Then now he's like, I think he's at Miami now as the CEO of the racetrack or one of those big tracks. So,
I love that.
Great advice.
But like on a serious note is get any kind of experience that you can, and if you do not do something to set yourself apart from everybody else, the hundreds. Like when I was a simulator performance engineer, I helped look through the pile of resumes or CVs that came in for the graduate in vehicle dynamics. I think the initial pile of CVs was like 500 to 800 CVs, first of all. And then after going through the filters on criteria before they reached me and the head of vehicle dynamics, we ended up going through something like 100 CVs. And if you just did the exact same motorsport engineering course as everybody else, and there's nothing in there that says, I went above and beyond, I'm super enthusiastic, I'm super curious, I wrote these models in my life, I did this analysis in my free time. If there's not something in there to set you apart, I'm not that interested to look at your CV. And the people that come after me aren't going to either.
Also, Blake, quickly as well, something I wanted to ask, because you can learn a lot of these software packages at home.
Yep.
With your experience, when you say CAD, computer-aided design, or general software, which pieces of software do you think could people learn at home that would have value in a Formula One team that are being regularly used in F1 teams? Just because I feel like, when I did a bit of CAD when I was younger, but knowing the exact programs that the real teams are using means that, if I can get really good at this, then I've got a potential in.
Yeah, so I will say most of the Formula One teams use NX or CATIA right now. And those are big commercial packages, which are expensive. If you go to university, for example, at Oxford Brookes, where I went, they had academic CATIA licenses, so you could learn CATIA. On the other hand, people change teams all the time, and you could be a senior designer with, 8 years of experience in CATIA, and then you go somewhere else and they're using Siemens. And you're like, that doesn't disqualify you from that, because you know how to use CAD. You just have to learn a new interface. There's other free CAD software online. Like if you want to start drawing stuff right now, there's a thing called Onshape, and it's a web-based CAD thing. I use it for doing DIY stuff all the time. So, there are ways that you can learn this. If you want to learn programming, if you can't get a MATLAB academic license, start learning Python yesterday. Make sure you know how to use Excel. If you can't use Excel, there's Google Sheets. There's honestly, if you have enough dedication, and you can literally Google everything and find tools and resources to solve the problems and gain the skills that you need to set yourself apart from every other person applying for that job. That was a long answer,
Really?
but like
Nice.
that gets me fired up.
Great advice. Yeah, no, really useful advice. Now, this next guy, Molnar.Joseph5, he's asked a couple of questions, so I'm probably going to pick one or two, but let's have a look. So this is quite a techie one by the sound of it. Are all the simulation tools for vehicle performance built in-house, or do they use commercial tools as well, such as Optimum G softwares or other vehicle dynamics softwares? Well, that's gone straight over my head, but I assume you know what he's talking about.
That's so basically there's a range, a whole suite of tools that Formula One teams and racing teams will use. You've got suspension kinematic software, so that's you plugging in the suspension linkages and looking at all the interactions of those things. There's packages to analyze tire data and produce tire models that you can use in the simulations, and then there's lap time simulation packages, which is the bread and butter of every team, which is, you've got this virtual car around the virtual track, and you can say, right, go do a lap, and then I want to measure all the parameters, and like, how's the car behaving, how's the performance, what's the balance likely to be, and so on. You can use that to perform sensitivities so that you can see what rear wing should we run this weekend. That's a lap simulation problem. And then on from that, then you have your real-time models, which will be basically the physics behind your driver in the loop simulator, and all these things are related. So most Formula One teams use bespoke software packages. I do not know of any Formula One teams using Optimum G, but that's just because these teams have enough money and resources they can develop the tools by themselves. There are a lot of smaller teams and Formula One teams using Canopy, which is a cloud-based simulation. Oh, and I've heard several people that have worked with that in the industry. It's quite good. I actually reached out to them if they wanted to do some educational content, and they said, we're not interested right now. It's like, oh, you're making too much money. I see. I understand. Yeah. but like, those kind of things are good in terms of, there's some other packages that people will use, but I think Canopy is probably one of the most popular ones right now that's not bespoke. And I think that's a couple of McLaren guys that used to make that, or that ex-McLaren people that have gone on to make that. I think almost everything in a Formula One is bespoke. Some of the smaller teams will probably be using Canopy, but they've got RaceWatch as a strategy software. A lot of teams use RaceWatch. A lot of teams have their own software packages that analyze strategy and timing. So yeah.
Very good.
Interesting. All right. I'm going to ask the next one from Gaspard _ FRL. Blake, how much did you get paid for the amount of hours you worked?
Boom.
No, I'm just kidding. Here's my advice on that to anybody. Never, ever, 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 if you work in motorsport, calculate your hourly wage, unless you're Adrian Newey, right? Everybody used to make the joke. It's like, he's a bit of a legend. Everybody's heard of Adrian, right? And it was like one of those things. I think somebody calculated once as a joke. I don't know if it's true, but it's like, if he dropped a 20-pound note on the floor, it would cost him more money to pick it up than it would just to keep walking, right? And whereas, like this is legendary status, Adrian Newey, right? But whereas like as me, as a trackside performance engineer, I made decent money. I don't want to give numbers. It's not particularly interesting. I never wanted to calculate my hourly salary, because if that was the case, then I might as well just go, work at fast food. Yeah. But I think like probably an entry level junior engineer salary, probably low 30s right now. Yeah, it's not a lot of cash. Like if you're hot shit and you're pretty clever and you want to make some cash, go work in banking. I mean, you're gonna work some hours in that as well in finance, fine. But if your goal is to, if your first thing is how much money am I going to make? Am I going to get loaded?
You're in the wrong
go
business.
somewhere else. Like literally, like I'm not trying to discourage you, but I am trying to discourage you, because if you're not passionate about it,
you need the right.
Yeah, you're gonna,
don't you?
Yeah,
well, so Blake, like when you go to a race, how much would you have to pay for out your own back pocket? I'm assuming all flights and accommodation, nothing at all.
No, so the teams will pay. The teams will pay hotels. The teams pay flights. All your transports to and from. Let's say that you live, south of England, and you need to get to the factory. Probably you need to pay your own way to get up to the factory. Let's say that you're a mechanic or something that you're not in the factory that often because of how often you're away for work, and the cars are gone half the time for flyways. And the other thing is, like, you get also, most teams will compensate traveling staff a per diem, a daily amount, which covers, say you don't eat at the track, you can have food or drink and you're taken care of. I was never out of pocket as a result of going away. Actually, because, for 6 years I was traveling to all the races, I saved so much cash, and I had the per diems. Definitely. It's fun. I'm not trying to discourage anybody, because it is a lot of work. It's a lot of hours, but some of the experiences that I have, nobody in the world could pay for those experiences that I got to have, or that I earned, or whatever.
And if you do work in F1 and you ever do the Austin Grand Prix, if you're listening to this and you get to work in F1, you go to the Austin Grand Prix Sunday night in Pete's Dueling Piano Bar or the Blind Pig, you will have the time of your life.
Yeah, I frequented both of those. I always avoided the piano bar, because I heard some people usually got pretty loose there Sunday night, and my hangovers kill me. So Blind Pig, definitely a great time. Up on the roof terrace, great music, a couple Pabst Blue Ribbon, the vibes.
Well, actually, if you become a content creator, even better, Tom. I mean, we saw each other in Miami. Like, I don't want to make people feel
Go on, talk about it.
So Tom was in Miami, and I was there as well. I was with a client who had a very nice time, and one of the things that we both did was go to a party at a hotel, a certain brand, well-known hotel, with this is going to give it away. It's just Hilton. I mean, it's Paris Hilton was there, so we had Paris Hilton on the decks. We had the McLaren boys there. We had free booze.
Apparently, Serena Williams was there. Although I didn't see her.
Serena Williams was there. Yeah. These are the circles we move in these days. To see
all right, just not to hijack the show too much, but when are we going to end up at a race this season? The three.
Yeah, we should do it.
Well,
definitely do it.
I was going to actually ask you, Blake. I'm hijacking my own question here. Have you got any recommendations for both Austria and Hungary? Because I should be going to both this year.
Yes. Budapest.
Great city.
Budapest is beautiful, fantastic. You will not be short of a great time. It's not particularly expensive. There's a restaurant that I always used to eat at, and I remember very, very well walking into the restaurant. I was at Force India. It was my first time at Budapest. We walk into this restaurant called the Pomodoro. It's an Italian restaurant in Budapest. Yes, we didn't go have goulash that night. I'm sorry, but this place was fantastic. And we walk in. We go sit at this table in the back, and I look over to my right, and there's Michael Schumacher and his trainer having a meal back in the corner. And that was one of those moments, like, I was in the industry for about a year at that point, and I'd seen Michael in the paddock before, but it's seeing Michael Schumacher having a meal out at a restaurant, just like some normal dude.
Even legends have to eat.
Yeah, and so. A fantastic restaurant, great steaks, great pasta. They have this priest choker pasta, and they get the big wheel of Parmesan, and they pour a little bit of spirits. They light the Parmesan. They scrape the cheese, pour in some tomato sauce live there at your table. If you don't end up at that restaurant and send me photographs, I will be slightly disappointed in you.
Okay.
And Tom, take lots of pairs of shorts. Budapest is always boiling hot. It is so hot there. I wasn't expecting it. First time I went, it was like the hottest place on earth. It's good weather.
I love the place.
Unexpectedly. It's a great city. Absolutely fantastic city.
Happy days.
We should definitely go to a race together. There must be a way of making that happen. I think I'll be at Silverstone. But potentially Vegas, actually. Oh, I've got an idea for Vegas. We'll take that offline.
Okay.
Got an idea.
Let's discuss.
Okay.
As long as you're paying, Tim.
I will try and find someone else.
Exactly. That's the rule.
Yeah. Okay, this is my favorite. This is highbrow stuff, really technical. And I assume there are technicalities within this. What's your morning hair routine? Always looking like a spunk. That is from F1 Luke. Oh, it's Luke Sam.
You know what? I absolutely love Luke Sam. What an absolute legend. Hilarious dude. My morning hair routine, it's something like I wake up, and then since I'm a degenerate content creator that lives at home and I sit in gym shorts most of the day and I wear free hats, thanks multiviewer, you're an absolute legend. I wash my hair, might put a little bit of product in it. I might just throw a hat on. I might go for a little run or a cycle. I let the sweat marinate for about 30 minutes before I shower, and I'll have a little bit of breakfast and maybe a macchiato or flat white off of my Rancilio Silvia espresso machine. A little bit of latte art. Come on, Luke. He's so funny though. I love his content. What's the
product? What product do you use, Blake? What's your choice?
Is it what's the Soho wax, the light blue one? It's like the matte clay. That's it. I mean, Tim's not wearing a hat today. Any audio listeners? No. Hair's looking absolutely on point.
I use the VO5. Not the. Is it the wax or the putty? I think it's the wax.
Okay.
It's like the really, really thick stuff. You've really got to rub it in your hands to warm it up.
Real technical stuff here.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It holds maximum hold, 5-star hold. That's what it's all about. You got to get the hold.
It's looking good, man. Looking sharp. Me and Tom looking like, yeah.
Well, you never know what you're going to get with Tom's hair. Because sometimes,
we're looking unbothered. We're looking relaxed. We're looking chill. Like we don't have any meetings on today. We don't have to make a call to somebody in Las Vegas later to say, hey, my buddy Tomo and Blake, we're trying to get out of here and vibe out. What are we saying?
Yeah, exactly.
That's true.
But sometimes Tom's is like all floppy and he looks like a character out of some Hugh Grant film.
I meant to have a word with you about this.
Beautifully done.
Actually, because I remember this episode. This was like a while back, and I just was like, "Oh, this isn't going to use video wise. Like, it's only going to be audio." Oh, yeah. So I lit my hair was like it was like almost parted down the middle. It looked ridiculous, and then you clipped part of it and put it on the bloody internet, and I'm like, "Tim, why, man? Why have you done me dirty like that?"
I don't know. It just felt right. Good hair chat. Have we got any others? Have we got a couple more here?
There's two good questions from this list, and it goes. One of the first ones from Declan Carneo 2, and then the other one from Yago Cardu, and it's basically a path from graduating to job in F1 and then getting a job at Red Bull. So my path is probably not particularly unique. The only weird thing about my path is coming from the US. So here's that in like, I'll try to do it in like 60, 70 seconds. Mechanical engineering background. I started quite late. I didn't go to university until I was like 20. I just took a couple years out after high school because I didn't know what I wanted to do. You don't need to know what you want to do right away. Sometimes it's worth waiting, right? I got heavily involved in the Formula Student program at the University of Texas at Arlington, and that gave me my second exposure really to the motorsport world. The first one, as we talked in the first episode, was doing Spec MX5 club racing in the US. So Formula Student is a collegiate design series where you design, build, race, present a small scale Formula Student car. They are fast. You know, they've got up to 600cc engines. They've got aerodynamics on them. They're very cool. They're insane. That really changed it for me. Then I was like, right, I want to be an engineer in Formula One. How do I do it? I looked across. I was like, well, I need to get to the UK. Yep, I need to get to the UK. So I'll go to Oxford Brookes University to do a motorsport master's degree for a year. And then I was like, okay, I started applying for jobs. And the good thing is, me being a foreigner to the UK/EU, I needed a visa. And as a result of doing this master's degree, at the current time, the immigration regulations allowed me to apply for a 2-year post-study work visa, which is super important. If you do not have the right to work in the country that you're applying for, they will take your, and especially if you don't have experience, which I did not have. If you don't have the right to work, your CV goes out of the big pile and it goes straight into the bin. Those are the rules. Like it's like, why would they consider you, who is probably no experience, very little experience, despite how ambitious you may look, and then 2, they have to pay for your visa when there's somebody local that has the same experience as you. Fine. So I somehow got a job at Force India as a student placement. My first, this was like somebody's, second year job that they were supposed to be doing, like in between their first and second years in university. Me, 25, with a master's degree. I'm like, I'll do that job for peanuts. It doesn't matter. And then I got promoted to a junior engineer. So I got a decent salary then. It was still not great. That's fine. And then I became a trackside performance engineer when a vacancy was opened and they needed somebody who could do the job. And I was kind of like the least worst person there at the time.
I mean, there's so many routes in, isn't there? Yep. And it's so different for every individual. Do you know what this has made me think? This feels like there should be like we should webinar this. Like this should be like a LinkedIn style live webinar to talk about how to get into jobs like yours, jobs like Tom's as well, you know, content creation.
How do you do it
in Formula One? How do you do that? And then there's a lot of people, you know, particularly now I'm working with a lot of talent at the moment, and it's not easy to stand out as an engineer or as a content creator from all the hundreds and thousands of other people that want to work in this space. So I'm thinking like live webinar, get a sponsor, stick it on the internet.
Can I dive in there?
Yes,
I've done both. I did 12. Yes. I did 11 years of engineering in Formula One, and I've done coming up on 2 years of content creation. I swear to God, content creation is harder than engineering in Formula One, and that's a really weird thing to say, because content creators and influencers.
I wouldn't get away with saying that, would I?
No, you might not. You might not, because it sounds like but like let me say it. I think it is harder. Here's the thing. In order to get a job in Formula One, you need to have access to probably an education, which, depending on where you live, could cost a lot of money. In the U.S., getting a state education at a public university is expensive. Me, as a foreigner coming to the UK to do housing and the degree, it is expensive. I was fortunate to have access to funds, you know, the people to help me out to pay for some of that. As simple as, you know, yes, there are grants and stuff like that, but I didn't actually get any of those. So I'll put my hand up. I was in a very privileged and fortunate position. And then after that, you then have to be good enough or enough experience or enough well-connected enough to meet people to help introduce you to that. Whereas if you wanted to be a content creator, you don't need anything to start. You literally need a phone. You literally need a telephone with a camera. You can start there, and that's fine. But then it's like building all those steps. There is no roadmap. There is no like, Tomo, your path. Your man, Aldas, Tim, what's your path? There's so many different paths, and then as a result of how popular motorsport is becoming, there's also thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and you are competing for eyeballs. You know, I don't see it as a competition between me and the people I know in this space, because it doesn't work like that. There are literally enough eyeballs to consume all of that content. But it's your job to find ways and offer interesting enough points of view, interesting enough perspectives, funny takes, humorous takes. I mean, we just talked about Luke Sam for a minute. His memes and clips and content are hilarious, and he stands out. But I'm pretty sure he's just a dude doing it from his room.
Yep.
So I think it's harder. I think it is harder. The barriers to entry are different, but once you're into Formula One, unless you're terrible, you'll be all right. Whereas you can't even, content creation is hard.
That's the thing. I think with creation, you see the people who have risen to the top and get the big numbers, but you don't see all of the thousands of others who've given it a go and have tried and haven't reached that, because it's so accessible now, which is great, but also that means there's a lot more people doing it. So I think the requirements are, you have to do more to stand out. Like, even, you know, when I started in 2019, there were very few people doing it, and that kind of, I benefited from kind of being early to the niche, I guess. But yeah,
you're also very good. You would, but seriously,
but
if you weren't good, you still wouldn't be here.
Yeah, but I've been able to like work on it over time, and I've had that, you know, I got furloughed, which enabled me to do it over lockdown and all of that. So there's all these different factors, you know, furlough crew, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's one more question I've got. Actually, I was meant to ask this last time we spoke, and I forgot. You've obviously worked Force India, Red Bull, so you've had Otmar Safnauer and Christian Horner both as the top boss of your relative teams. How were they different as bosses, and were you particularly like one-to-one with them at all?
I had several conversations with both of them, but in terms of like me and the way I needed to work, like, for example, when Otmar or Christian would come speak to me or talk to me, it'd be like, what happened during the session? How did it go? How was your driver during your simulator session? How's that new package we brought to the car? I think both of them are very, very good team principals. And it's very interesting seeing Otmar under fire from Laurent Rossi right now, which we talked about the other week. Which is super interesting, because I feel like Otmar is an extremely strong, no BS, get stuff done kind of team principal, and Christian the same. But both of them, in my experience, were extremely direct. And you didn't really have to be like, oh, is something going to happen? It's like, they'll just tell you what they want or what they need.
Yeah.
And I think that's perfect. And and the good thing is they both let people, they are empowered to employ people to get them to do whatever they think is the right thing to do. And they'll have conversations. And obviously there's some situations where politics or commercial things or anything else gets in the way. And you're like, this is the optimum thing to do, but for other reasons, we're obliged to do this. And you just say, okay, I understand. But for the most part, they hire people and put them in place to do what they want to do. Otmar hasn't probably appointed very many of those people that he's, being asked to put the hammer down onto. So let him cook. Let him cook.
Yeah. Give him time.
Yeah. I mean, Otmar does get a slightly hard time sometimes, but you don't get to that sort of position without being seriously talented at what you do.
I mean,
for all of these team principals.
Force India was continually financially in the mud. Whatever reason, a whole wide range of situations. I do believe that Otmar was responsible for helping keeping that machine going. And, that's an interesting skill that's maybe not the situation at Alpine now, for example, but I think he's, Yeah,
he's got a pretty hardcore boss at Alpine, isn't he?
Yeah.
He doesn't pull any punches. Brilliant, Blake. I think we've pretty much covered them. It's great to get you on again. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, and same to you, Tom, as well, for jumping on for this little part 2 of Blake. I'm sure we'll see you again soon. And I feel like there's more that we can do together. So for now, Blake Hinsey, thank you very much for joining us once again on the MotorMouth podcast.